You spent a decade in drug development. First, can you talk about what that means? Like, what does a decade in drug development mean for someone who doesn't understand that?
Sure.
And I would love to dive into what does the average person not understand about how drugs make their way into clinical trials, drug patents, how those work,
Yeah.
big pharma, if we're talking about more conspiracies and whatnot. I think you have really unique insight into this, having been in the drug industry for a decade, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
So where I came at it more was from working with contract research organizations. So for those people who aren't familiar, like a pharmaceutical company is responsible for a lot of things involving drug development. Pharmaceutical companies don't just have a team of scientists who sit there in labs and try to make up new chemicals and new compounds. Pharmaceuticals are often involved in finding labs or finding scientists working on a particular product. They find an interesting biotech here. A lot of small biotechs, like 2-3 person drug companies, people who discover a new compound, they're looking to get acquired. They develop, you're doing your graduate school work and you find an interesting new compound and you study it for a while. You work with a couple other scientists and you go, wow, this could be a big drug. We don't have the money to develop it. We're going to run this through a couple of preliminary trials, show some promising preclinical data, which is like rat research and all that, and hope that Novartis is going to look at this and go, oh, that's a good drug. We'll pay you guys $30 million for your development plan. Great. That's how a lot of drugs start out. So then the pharmaceutical company basically becomes a corporation that doesn't necessarily do the drug development itself. It looks for promising drugs, finds them, brings them in, gets them through the approval process, and finds the companies who will then produce the drug, and they look out for the patents, and they do the marketing and the sales and all that. They're basically almost that like central hub in the process of drug development. The drug development process and the actual clinical trial process, you have a compound that you're interested in producing or that you're interested in investigating. You run it through a series of human trials. You get all the paperwork done and all the approvals and all the evidence over to the FDA or whatever, or the body that you want to look at it, and it gets approved. That is a very resource-intensive role. And depending on the drug, you may need a lot more people involved in that from 1 month to the next. You're a big pharmaceutical company with 500 different compounds in development. Your personnel needs may be huge. They may be tiny 1 month and next. So they hired third-party companies to actually do the drug management. These are contract research organizations. That's what I worked for initially.
Okay.
So what they do is a large pharma would come to us, or sometimes a smaller one, and say, hey, we have this drug that we need to investigate. And what my company would do is we would take the preclinical data for the drug. We would put together some of the INDs, all the paperwork and all that, present it to the government agency, and say, hey, we want to investigate the drug. Here is the protocol for this particular clinical trial. Here's all the ethical considerations. Here's the drug. Here's what it's going to do. Here's what we think it's going to do. Here's what we want to find out. Will you approve it? The agency says, yes, go ahead, run the trial. Or the agency says, no, we've got some issues, in which case we take back the protocol and go, we should make some changes to that. That's basically grossly oversimplified, but that's basically what it is. So in that process though, so that's kind of what we go through at every different phase, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And phase 1 is basically for, first in humans, basically if we give this to somebody, phase 1 trials are the smallest ones that drugs start out with. And that is if we give this to a healthy person, is it going to make them unhealthy? Basically safety and efficacy. Is this drug itself going to actually hurt people? So that's the ones you see like recruitment on college campuses and things like that. Phase 1 trials are always in healthy normals. They tend to be small.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Sure, absolutely.
I have a question about that. So if you give it to a healthy person, but I'm assuming you're only giving it to them because they might have a health issue. Is that right?
Not with phase 1.
Okay.
So interestingly, if you look at cancer drugs, chemotherapies, you'll see them talk about phase 2 as being the first phase.
Did this also happen with I think it's AZT, the HIV drug? They skipped phase 1.
Very often, yes. If it's a drug that may have such severe side effects that it can cause severe illness or cause severe reactions, they may not get it approved for phase 1.
Interesting.
Like, for example, chemotherapy.
Yeah.
Like a lot of chemotherapy is extremely destructive. No sane person, you're not going to ethically tell somebody to go through what essentially amounts to like chemical torture for the sole purpose of seeing if it's safe for people. We know it's not safe for people.
Right.
But
it's better than the alternative.
It's better than the alternative. So those will usually skip phase 1 or get like an exemption. So certain drugs.
Interesting.
But if it's like a new blood pressure medication or anything else, okay, let's see what happens. Or people. So generally that runs through phase 1. Phase 2 is typically like dose finding. Okay, to have an actual effect on people, does not only phase 1 says, is this safe or not? And again, this can all vary depending on the drug. Phase 2 basically says, okay, does it actually have an effect? And at what dose does it have an effect? If we take 5 milligrams, does it do anything? If we take 10 milligrams, if we take 20 milligrams, does it do anything? So they use phase 2 then to get the data to get the phase 3 trials, which are the huge ones.
Okay.
The phase 3 trials are the big ones, lots of patients, lots of subjects, control arm and whatnot. Those are the really expensive ones. So one of the biggest things, first of all, is to understand how many drugs fail at each phase. Usually less than 1% of the drugs that go through phase 1 trials make it to phase 3 and actually get approved.
Holy shit.
Well, and you'll see all kinds of numbers. Some people are like, it's 1 out of every 1,000. Some people are like, it's 1 out of every 50. It really depends on the type of drug.
Yeah.
And the difficulty is you may have the most promising compound in the world in rat studies. And it goes through and it's safe for humans. And then in phase 2, you find out it's safe for humans because it doesn't do anything in humans. Or you get this drug that really promising in rat studies is safe for humans. At 20 milligrams, it's fine for humans. And it seems to have some effect. And then in phase 3 trials, you find that it's actually no better than existing treatments and has more side effects. It's not going to get approved. Hey, I've got this great blood pressure drug. It lowers everyone's blood pressure systolic on average by 6 points. Great, it's safe. Well, the safety profile is exactly the same as this other drug, or if not a little bit worse, but this other drug lowers it by 10 points. We're not going to approve a drug with side effects, the same administration, everything else, that is not any better than anything else on the market. There's a lot of things, and that's when you get into like non-inferiority and all that. If you can prove that your drug is just as good as an existing one, you might be able to get approval. If it's just as good but has more side effects, you might not get approval. There are all different ways for drugs to fail.
Interesting.
If a drug fails, it doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad drug. It just means that maybe the wrong indication was found for it. Maybe the dose that was selected in phase 2 ended up being too low to make a difference in phase 3. Maybe the dose in phase 3, maybe the dose that they found in phase 2 that has a certain amount of side effects, like phase 2, you're like 10 milligrams, moderate effects, 20, good effects, a lot of side effects. Depending on which one you take to phase 3, you may find that the drug is no longer better than any other option out on the market. So there are a lot of ways drugs can fail. But the long story short is there are a lot of ways drugs can fail, even good ones. So that leads to a lot of the issues with why patents exist, for example. Because some of these drugs, phase 3 trials can take millions, tens of millions of dollars and years and years and years to approve. Companies are going to be loath to invest in that unless they know they can make their money back. And not only that.
That's why it comes in.
Because not only that, you're paying not just for that drug, but for all the other drugs that failed that company had to invest in.
Right.
To get to that one drug that worked. Now, obviously the margins here are staggering on some of these drugs. They make obviously billions. Nobody's ever accused pharmas of being nonprofits.
Right.
But it's understanding that, hey, drug pricing isn't always just about the value of the drug itself. Very often it's like, okay, what can the market absorb? Because right now, Novartis may sit down. I'm calling out Novartis. I'm sorry to anybody who works for Novartis. Novartis may sit down and say, well, we got a really weak drug pipeline coming up. We don't have a lot of blockbusters coming out, but we have this one that's coming through that's doing really well. We think the market can absorb a price of $600 for a month treatment. We could probably negotiate $500 a month with insurance. 500, 600 it is. That's what we're going to charge, not because we necessarily think it's worth it, but because we think that's what we can get for it. Because that's what we need to be profitable for the next year to allow us to continue on drug development.
That makes sense.
So there's a lot of that. Now, of course, a lot of other things go into pricing, but that's a pretty major thing.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Because I understand that. And on the other side of the coin, outside the U.S., we have Canadian prices, we have U.K. prices that are significantly lower for the same drug.
Yeah.
How does that work? And I can understand why people would be furious about that. Yeah. To be like, well, I could get the exact same drug for a fraction of the cost in another country. What the fuck is that?
So what's going to happen is, let's say I have this drug that I think I can get $200 a pill for in the U.S., just pulling out numbers. Canadian government says, okay, we'll buy it. We'll only approve it if we will only buy it through our health system at $50 a pill. That's it. That's all we're going to pay you for it. The company's going, well, we've already determined that each pill doesn't cost us that much to produce. It's not like this pill costs us $45 and that's eating into our margin.
Right.
Every unit we sell is going to be more profit.
Right.
So yeah, we'll sell it for $50 a pill to Canada. India's only going to pay us $10 a pill for it? Well,
India doesn't get that fucking
maybe not. Yeah, because everyone's just going to go to India for it. But that's why the generics then come out in India. Like you see a lot of companies like China and India, which often have generics, and very often it's like generics that shouldn't be generic because they're still on patent. But that's why. Because they're like, look, we can't even pay you $50 a pill. That is like literally like 2 months' salary in some places of this country.
Right.
We can't afford that. So that's one of the problems is these companies
It's a big fucking problem.
It's a big fucking problem. It's a big fucking problem. And that's why people go, well, maybe the U.S. should have this sort of collective bargaining. And to a certain extent, the U.S. has some power to do so. But the fact that private insurance is so big, it's very often bargaining between the companies and the insurance companies. What's the insurance company willing to pay? The insurance company goes, well, X number of people are going to be on this. Here's our premiums. Here's what we're realistically going to pay you. You have this new diabetes medication. If everybody switches to that and we've got to pay you $300 or like, let's say $150 a pill each, that's probably going to eat into our profits. We're not going to do that. The drug company negotiates, says, okay, how about 140? So there's a lot of that goes on.
So a lot of people will blame Big Pharma, but do you think a lot of the blame would actually lie on the insurance companies?
There's a huge amount of that. And, the insurance companies obviously don't want to pay a lot either.
Right, of course.
But it's always going to be, and I think that's why it's very easy to blame Big Pharma, but like there's a lot of reasons. Like it costs a lot of money to file an IND.
Yeah.
If drug development weren't so, and I'm not saying that, Big Pharma is going to feel that $100,000 it costs to file that initial drug application. But a small biotech is not going to be able to afford that. It is too expensive.
Makes sense.
To stop those 3 scientists' friends from being able to do it. So what they're going to do, they're going to have to up the valuation and sell to a large pharmaceutical.
That makes sense.
And that's the only way their drug stands a chance of getting approved. So we've almost created a system where some of the costs are so high for small companies, but so only big companies can absorb them. How much do you charge? Does the FDA triple their costs so that pharmaceutical companies will because everyone says, well, there needs to be more FDA oversight of this stuff. And, the FDA is sloppy and too many drugs get approved. Do we increase costs? Do we increase oversight? Do we approve less? Well, that might make the issue worse.
Right.
So, and that's, it's another one of those areas where I think there's no easy culprit to it. There's so many layers. It's a system. It's a systemic issue. And high drug prices, yes, absolutely. I say hey man, Pharma is not exactly like scraping by here. They're not, you don't pull in there and see Hyundais are great cars. I love them. But you don't see just a whole, you look at the C-suite and you look at all the managing directors. These are people who are not hurting for money.
Right.
Same thing with the insurance
Never mind
companies.
the salaries and the stock options.
Exactly.
It's insane.
Exactly. But what you have is you have companies who are beholden to their stockholders. You've got investors looking at their pipelines. What drugs do you have coming up? How much do we think that they're going to be able to sell this drug for? How long are they going to have the patent for? Because as soon as your patent expires.
Me Too drugs come out.
Exactly. Because I can sell this for $500 a pill now. A generic manufacturer, again, doesn't cost me $500 to make.
Right.
The $500 was all the other costs that were associated with this. Cost me about $3 to make.
Right.
Generic company's going to come along and sell them for $5.
Right.
There goes my business.
Right. Yeah.
So that's
why we see so many different statins coming out. It's like we see all these different drugs that essentially do the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and a big part of that as well is in the approval process, this whole idea of non-inferiority. If I can come up with a compound that I can sell that is not inferior to anything out there, maybe it's only 1% better, I can get a patent for it and I can sell it on patent and actually make some money off this. In some cases, that's the only way that they can recoup development costs. Because there have been drugs, like I was associated with a blood pressure drug at the time. I think I'm not allowed to say so. But yeah, they'll spend years and years struggling to get it approved. Oh, the FDA didn't like the final dose. They didn't like this profile. They didn't like that. Okay, well, we can finally find some indication that this can get approved for. We couldn't get this drug approved to treat this condition, but we can get it approved to treat this condition. GLP-1 drugs and what they can get approved for and what they were originally approved for versus off-label use. The off-label use may have been the original reason it was developed. But that wasn't enough to get it approved, so they got it approved for a separate use. And now people prescribe it for that separate use, but the off-label was the original purpose. That happens pretty often.
That's so interesting.
So you get a lot of drugs that come out like that where it's just they're marginally different. They're like incremental steps up.
Right.
The pharma company knows that the market is there. They know that the insurance companies have already factored in, well, all of our every diabetic patient we have costs us X amount per month. Well, okay, that's how much the market can absorb. You don't have to go through the price negotiations. There's a lot. But again, it's a system.
Here's what I don't understand. Let's say you have a drug that is maybe 1% better, gets approved, but now you've got to sell that drug at a huge cost, whereas the insurance companies or whomever might be like, why would I pay that much more when I could just use this marginally less effective drug and pay a fraction of the price? So then my question is, how are they selling that drug? And where does that come in? Like, who are they having to convince? Like, why would any company willingly spend huge amounts of money for a marginally more effective drug, even though it was approved? That doesn't make sense to me.
That's where a lot of that marketing and sales comes in. And I've got to be careful with this because I don't want to.
You don't want to be killed.
Yeah, so it disappeared. I think that's why a lot of people object to drug advertising. There have been a lot of regulations about what like pharmaceutical sales reps can give to doctors and hospitals. Because the pharma sales rep says, hey, like I'm not going to pick on Novartis. I am Big Pharma's number 3 sales rep. And we have you're the doctor. We have a good working relationship. And I continuously, I come around, I aid you in procurement. We're good friends. I bring you to a lot of these different dinners. I give you opportunities to speak at some of these conferences and all that. I don't give you money per se, but we have a close working relationship and we have a close professional relationship. And my company has a close professional relationship with your clinic and your organization. We are now hoping to shift all of our physicians from using this old drug, which is, there's a generic out, but we have this new one that's actually better. And you can tell your patients it's actually better. Because this will lower your blood pressure by another 1 or 2 points. Why would you want to use the one that's less effective? So I'm now going to the physician and saying, look, this is a better compound. The physician goes,
this feels so slimy. This does, and I know it's just the example you're using, but like the 1 or 2 points, that's where it starts to feel slimy. They're not lying.
But you're not lying. But also, think about the culpability of the individual. How many people insist on getting the name brand drug and say the generic never worked as well, even if it's exactly the same?
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of that. And that's not to like victim blame and say you're all responsible, but it's really powerful.
Yeah.
If you tell somebody that they can get their condition treated by a new drug, brand new drug, just came out, it's better than the old one, like 1%. Or, it works just as well as the old one, but fewer side effects. You're going to have a hard time convincing them to take the generic when they could get the new one. Yeah. That's human nature. It's the new shiny thing. It's why the iPhone 16, like, is this a 16 or is this a 14 or a 13 or like, what is it? Who knows? Right. You open the thing up, you can't tell the difference. Right. You sell the new shiny. That same thing holds true. And I think that plays into it.
Man, I was telling you before we started recording, but I've been getting very into that world, trying to learn more about it. The issue is it's very difficult to find nuanced and unbiased sources on it, which is why I was so excited to speak to you about it, because you give so much, you have nuance, you have direct experience with it. I'm reading some books right now on it, but all of the books are extreme. Yeah. They're so extreme. And it's like, I think what they do is they highlight, listen, there have obviously been some horror stories within pharma, but like that's not the majority of what happens. That's not like the day-to-day, and it's easier to highlight those and make it appear to be just this one evil thing, when reality is like there's some really amazing things that it's done. And, you were talking about the researchers involved, and like just the amount of good that's happened is incredible. It's difficult to find unbiased and not sensationalistic sources on this. So I appreciate that insight, and I'm probably going to keep bugging you on it.
Yeah, no, and I think like you said, it's also really hard to find the actual villains. Yeah. Because again, like you look at the individual researchers, a lot of them are very passionate about it. They just realize the reality of, hey, if we want to make this into anything, we're going to have to sell. Yes. And you even look at like the people in the acquisitions in pharma, a lot of my colleagues in pharma and people who actually worked for the pharmaceuticals very much believed in the mission. They were like, hey, look, we know there's some uncomfortable truths, but yeah, this drug is only 1% better. But you know what? It's 1% better. And the next one after that will be 1% better and 1% better and 1% better.
That's a great argument.
We have to keep innovating. We have to keep doing this. we can't do it for free. And if we try to do it for free, development's going to stagnate. So there's a lot of people making rational arguments. And yes, you can get into the nuance and say, well, they're all wrong, and here's a way you could do it. You'd have to have such a systemic overhaul.
Yeah.
And I think we're really resistant to that.
The other aspect of it, the advertising, which I know people get really upset about, I understand. I can also see the other side of it as well. I was talking to this really great man. I'm going to try and bring him on the podcast. He's been a rep for 30 years.
Oh yeah.
He was saying, listen, like there are obvious issues with the advertising, but also if you look at the advertising, it also creates awareness.
Yeah.
For people who might not know that there's an issue with their health, that like maybe this isn't normal, whatever it is, like it does have other aspects. Like it's not just black and white.
Yeah.
There are aspects where people might see commercials for something and be like, you know what, I'm going to talk to my doctor about this issue I'm having. Yeah. And obviously their goal would be for them to take the drug. Right. But like, what if they didn't know they had that issue in the first place?
They give out a list of symptoms. They go, you may have blank. You go, I might. I know I have mesothelioma.
Right.
Do you remember those ads?
I do remember those.
I was like, do I have mesothelioma? I don't know. I might. I hear about it often enough.